Welcome back to Victoria 3. In this video, I'll be taking you through some tips to build a monstrous economy. This will be your guide to building, and the key emphasis there is on building a fundamentally monstrous mega economy, or at least one that's profitable, so that you can get on with the game and do what you want to do. Thank you so much for subscribing. We've made a huge push recently, and it's all down to you. Thank you for hitting the red button, and let's begin. Before we start with the construction and building tips, there are a couple of things to get out of the way. Firstly, research. This is important to unlock production methods, which we'll be talking more about in a little bit. They are, of course, fundamental to the built economy in Victoria 3, so you generally can't go wrong with building a lot of these things. Mechanical tools, the lathe. Next up, construction is expensive. I've covered my tax tips a little bit already, but as I've mentioned earlier, you can generally get away with increasing these a little bit. Watch as you will increase radicalism though. We'll talk a bit about that. But by and large, especially while you're undertaking a huge amount of construction, which of course is the focus of this video, so you bet your backside we're about to do, let's increase our taxes up to high, and let's also reduce wages. This will cost us just a little bit of intelligentsia approval, take a little bit of money out of their back pocket. Likewise with the armed forces, we're just going to strip them back a little bit, and we can take it further if we need to. And finally, of course, consumption taxes. Regular viewers will know that things like a grain tax, generally not a great idea. Hurts everybody, makes them really furious. We want to go for either cheaper ones that cost less authority but produce a lot of money. Liquor could be a good example, although I tend to stay away from those goods as well, preferring to tax either services or luxury items, clothes, furniture, porcelain. Those are my go-tos. With our taxes tweaked and people, granted, a little bit more pissed off, we've freed up a lot of money in our economy, and that's a good thing because the construction sector will cost us. And this leads me through into my first construction tip. You're going to want to focus on your basic industry first, and of course, that will begin with your construction sectors. The other part of this message, and I'll repeating this throughout the video, is to focus in on certain territories. We can't build a construction sector across the whole of Russia. We're going to run into some problems, even with smaller nations like this one. Instead, I'd encourage you to head to your buildings, construction, and take a look at how much you've already got. The key thing to understand about the construction sector is, like any other sector in Victoria 3, it uses goods. In this case, you can see it uses fabric and wood. So while we're using or building the sector, we're going to be consuming those goods. It does, of course, create employment, provide jobs and money, and more importantly, these per-level modifiers. For every level of construction sector that we build, we'll receive additional points towards construction, and the overall efficiency of construction within that state improves as well. Now, the reason why the states are so important is because we're likely going to want to focus in on one or two areas in particular and build them up, because these construction sectors have an operating cost, and we don't want to go too overboard. I see many players falling into that mistake. You can see we can filter by the number of peasants on this menu, or we could click into individual states as well and check their information tab to see the kind of resources that they have available and the number of people living in it. Generally, of course, it's a good idea to build up your capital territory. That will always be yours, even in times of revolution, and territories where there are more people, opportunities, and resources. I'm therefore going to build a couple of construction sectors right here on my capital territory. I'm going to increase it up to level 5 out of 15, and you'll notice that as I unpause the game, that will start to make a hit, a fairly significant one, against our economy. Temporary national expenses have increased those construction goods. If I stretch my sector further and wider, and we begin to construct multiple things at a time, or even just ramp it up, you'll notice these temporary costs start to increase. It will also, of course, as we mentioned earlier, temporarily increase the goods consumption for things like fabric and wood. Thankfully, in this case, we have plenty of money, and we're still building up our cash reserves, but it's important to note that the longer we continue to construct, the higher the price will get. You'll see constructed goods now at around £10,000. We'll talk a little bit more about production methods soon, but it's important to note that like any other building or sector in Victoria 3, when you navigate into it here, you can see that we can change the production method. We could move from wooden buildings to iron frame buildings, significantly increasing the modifiers, the outputs. Generally, this will also provide you with more jobs or better jobs that pay people better wages. Of course, the downside or upside, depending on how you want to look at it, is that you'll be consuming more goods. And you can see that this upgrade will consume more total tools, less fabric and wood, and considerably more iron. Another side tip here, by the way, is that you can tell at a quick glance the price of a good relative to your market, depending on how many coins are stacked up against it. You can see that in this case, the price of wood, if we use less, will go down. The price of iron, however, if we swap to this production method, will go up considerably, allowing us to possibly expand that sector. When it comes to expanding your economy, then I recommend you take a sector by sector approach. Obviously, if you head up to the top here, you'll get a reasonably good idea of what you need to immediately do. In this case, you can see my taxation capacity isn't very good. I'll talk a little bit more about taxation capacity and some of the legal interventions that you can make to improve your economy in a separate video. I really want to streamline the information in this one around building a great economy, and so that is what I will focus on here, so that you can understand buildings and markets in Victoria 3, and then we'll cover off laws and government institutions and all of that kind of thing that helps shape it in the second part. At the moment, though, in Naples, you can see we are short input goods, government administration. So the first thing I might build before we look into individual supply chains might be some additional government administration buildings here. You'll notice that more advanced buildings put considerably more cost on our temporary national expenses. So take care, and remember you can pause construction at any time to stop those temporary expenses from playing out. Now let's delve into a specific supply chain and try and fix some issues with it. You can apply this to virtually anyone. In this case, though, we have a great example that's come up. There's an input good shortage for the government administration building that we just built. It's nearly at full employment, which is great to see. And if I move down to its process, every building in Victoria 3 has this, by the way, we can see exactly what it's doing. This one is producing bureaucracy, an important yield for me. I'm using it to keep my generals and my populations incorporated. It's also producing taxation capacity. This is really important so that we're making as much money from our pops as possible in every territory. And finally, it's helping to urbanize the area. However, you can see that it's using a lot of paper, right? These government bureaucrats are using a lot of paper. And at the moment, as indicated by these coins, the base price for paper is absurd within my market. Let's use this then as a case study on how we can both increase and decrease demand in our economy and ultimately fix it and build a more thriving one. The first thing we can do is click into paper within our market. You can see that the price, as expected, super high. We could mess with the tariff laws if we want to a little bit. This will have a small change in revenue for us, but won't really do much else. You can see the issue here is that we have 101 buy orders fueled by our government administration, and currently there are only 40 sell orders, and we're relying on trade to do that. You'll notice I haven't really talked too much about trade in this video. It will feature more in my second one. The reason why I haven't is because, of course, to trade, we're reliant on being part of a market, a global market with AI partners who may or may not wish to suddenly destroy us at any moment. There's nothing wrong with trade, but here we're focusing in on building and providing for ourselves. So I don't really even want to be relying on those orders. Instead, we're going to need to figure out a way to get more paper. Production methods are currently limited to our paper mills. These mills are therefore going to be very important to fix the issues within this section of our economy. So we have our construction sector built up in this territory, and there is enough space to build some paper mills. Let's get a few of these down to fill this need domestically within our market. The paper mills will use those construction points that we got earlier by building the construction industry, and that will determine how quickly they'll be manufactured. As we build the paper mills, you'll see multiple ones coming online. Again, take care, as you don't want to take on too many expenses and bankrupt yourself. However, in this case, my economy is actually doing far too well. Our cash reserves are full, and we're still making money. That suggests to me I could lower taxes to improve people's lives and happiness, or start constructing more. Seeing as I have capacity to do more, I'm going to do just that. And at the moment, we're using taxation capacity or these government administration buildings as our case study. So I'm going to use the game's tooltip and jump around to the different regions that need more and build them more. Now I'm expanding my supply of paper and I'm expanding the government administration buildings where the paper's being used. We're starting to both fill up our shortfalls in taxation capacity and build a stronger economy. And you can see the price of paper now is coming more in line with the base price. And if we navigate over to the paper screen, you can see by building those paper mills, we've brought the demand down and therefore brought the price down because we have more supply in our market. Take a look. 103 sell orders, now most of which is coming domestically from our paper mills, of course providing more jobs for our populations, and we're fueling our own industry. This is exactly how you want to fill your gaps and provide more economic opportunity for your populations in Victoria 3. Of course, though, that's not the only demand to consider. This is a relatively advanced economic simulator. Seeing as we can afford to keep up our construction, thanks to our high national reserve and, of course, reasonable amount of gold stockpiled for a rainy day, I'm going to continue to expand, keep constructing at all times. This will keep those temporary costs stacked against us, though. To work around that and to keep our construction industry thriving, we'll of course need to make sure that we're giving it what it needs. It needs really basic things: fabric and wood, 25 per level. So, because we're going to be doing a lot of constructing, I'm also going to improve our supply of fabric and wood. I could do this, absolutely, through a variety of means, and I'll cover off those in just a minute. But firstly, really simply, to build up your own economy, we would again navigate in here, build our logging camps, and provide more wood to our domestic economy. Likewise with fabric, we can navigate to its applications and see it's a slightly more advanced good. Building farms to produce fabric and potentially other things. Here we'd produce meat for our people with livestock ranches. Will also move people out of their subsistence farming. This is kind of the bottom jobs. If you have nothing else to do, you do this and support yourself. Ideally, we'd have more livestock ranches, filling our need for fabric to keep our construction industry alive, and, as you can see, providing a range of extra employment for our pops. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we will cover off things like government, law, and institutions and how they play a very important role in shaping your economy down the line in a separate video. But in this one, we just want to cover off how to build our core economy. However, there are a couple of other functions that we should probably consider. These are the other ways on how you can create demand or induce demand destruction in your economy. Any industry or building, whether it be urban or rural, can of course be investigated closely. Here you'll see its employment and its cash reserves. A functioning economy will have productivity here, wonderful employment, cash reserves full, and goods down here that are around the base price or making you a lot of money on the output side. You can also, as I mentioned earlier, change its production methods. This will increase its productivity. You can see at the moment we're on the second level here, sweeteners, as opposed to the base level of bakery. What that's done is increased our goods production, groceries, up. And of course, the goods that it's consuming. As we unlock additional technologies, we'll be able to change our production methods, creating better jobs, more profit, and also using new resources. You'll see here, as indicated by all of these neat little icons, you can see just how many resources will go into different production methods. Another way to induce demand creation or destruction could be to subsidize an industry. Now, generally, you'd want to look to the least profitable ones to do this. Here, as we scroll through, you can see my shipyards aren't doing so hot. They have almost nothing in the cash reserves, and employment is currently hiring. We don't have enough people to work here. Well, why is that? And how could we incentivize more people to do it? We could, as I mentioned earlier, change these production methods, adding more to it, allowing it to produce more. We could look at its processes and see, does it have everything that it needs? Is it getting the inputs and producing the outputs? You could subsidize it. The state can subsidize buildings. You may not want to rely on this overall. It will increasingly put a burden on the economy. However, it will fix your employment issues. So if you're struggling to produce a certain good and you need a fast solution, subsidizing it is a great way to go about it. The other way, of course, could be to look at what the building is producing. In this case, the shipyards are building clippers and man of wars. And the price for man of wars is really low. I might want to help this industry by therefore shifting the things at the end of the market. Where are these things going? We could establish a new export route, find somebody to sell them to. Let's sell them to the French. Let's also sell them to the Egyptians. Why not? That will, as you can see, have an immediate impact on our price within our market because we're getting rid of these things. So the local supply has increased in price. And just like that, I've helped to make this industry, the shipyards, man of war industry, more profitable. And maybe my subsidies are no longer needed. And look at that. Through some market interventions by increasing the supply, or actually in this case, decreasing our domestic supply for the man of wars, I'm able to have a more productive and profitable shipyard industry. And this is, of course, just one case study in Victoria 3. We've looked at one industry and the inputs and outputs, and we've done a pretty good job. In fact, I'm now again too wealthy, and it's time to start producing some more. We could continue, of course, to go through the different sectors, lower our taxes to improve the lives of our people, and reduce the chance of revolution if we didn't want to be doing any constructing as well. Thank you very much for watching this video. I know it was probably a lot of information. I wasn't too much of an economics lecture. In my next one, not to overload you, we'll go over the politics, the political economy behind building a very strong, indeed a monster economy in Victoria 3. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.